Good afternoon, everyone. Happy October 7th in Texas. We'd like to welcome everybody. We will start shortly. We're going to give it a couple more minutes. I see we have about, looks like 55 attendees. So I'm going to give it a couple more minutes so we can start. I appreciate you all holding on, and we're excited to present this training for you this Friday. Thank you for jumping on board. And yeah, give it a couple more minutes and we'll go ahead and start. As a reminder, this is training 3, a required training as part of the Texas Homeowner Assistance Subrecipient training required in terms of onboarding. So this is training 3. You should have already participated in training 1, which is introduction into our program and grant opportunity. Training 2, which is introduction into our housing contract system. And now training 3 concludes your mandatory training with the fraud prevention part. We will go ahead and just give it one more minute and we will start. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon, October 7th, for the training 3 required training on the on the subrecipient side. I want to go ahead and introduce you all to Ms. Lizette Hinojosa, who's on the Homeowner Assistance Fund program. She is the Anti-Fraud and Quality Control Project Manager, and she's going to go ahead and introduce today's slide deck as to get us started. I'd like to remind everyone we will have some opportunity for questions and answers towards the end of the presentation. You also have the opportunity to submit your questions by using the tools that we have available with GoToWebinar on the question side of things. And let's go ahead and start with some of the housekeeping items. All the material is available on our TDHCA.state.tx.us webpage, which is available on the screen right now. If you click on that link, it will take you to our resource materials and get more information on the subrecipient activities part of things of the house. We have the onboarding manual. We have, and now we have training 1 and training 2 that are activated for you to review again. And we also want to transition and as a reminder that we are going to have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end of the training. You can also send your questions, or any follow-up questions that you may have. You can send it to our inbox at txhfa@tdhca.state.tx.us. Or you can also follow up with our contract specialist for any questions. The training will be recorded and posted on our webpage as soon as it becomes available. And again, want to thank you for your time. And now, without further ado, Ms. Lizette Hinojosa will go ahead and start the presentation. And Lizette, I'll pass it on to you. Let me go ahead and turn on your mic and your camera.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for training 3, which will focus on fraud, waste, and abuse. My name is Lizette Hinojosa, and I am the HAF Anti-Fraud and Quality Control Project Manager for the HAF program. I am tasked with leading the agency's anti-fraud efforts. I have 15 years experience as a state employee, mostly working for state regulatory agencies with a specialized background in compliance, auditing, fraud, anti-fraud, and investigations. And the goal for today's training is to introduce everyone to the definitions of certain terms that are associated with fraud, waste, and abuse. And also, we will review some red flags. And most importantly, we will discuss how to report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse to the agency. And as a reminder to everyone, as contractors and vendors for the state, all of you do play a huge role in assisting us with our anti-fraud efforts. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. And again, this is just a review. So as Flip mentioned earlier, all of you should have already gone through trainings 1 and 2. And so just to recap, some of the program elements are intake centers, housing services, and legal services. So all of you fall into one of those categories or several or a combination of those. And the next slide here, we talk about the reporting of fraud, waste, and abuse. And as a disclaimer, anyone regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, or sex is safe to report allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse to us. And in fact, we do encourage anyone and all of you to report any suspected or potential waste, fraud, and abuse to the program. And I will not read the entirety of the next statement, but again, this is a statement that is available on our website. It is also on our application portal for all applicants as a reminder that falsification of any documentations that contain any potential falsehoods and omissions, again, is misrepresentation and fraud. So we can go on to the next slide. And when we're talking about fraud, fraud is defined as any activity that relies on deception in order to achieve gain. And fraud becomes a crime when it is when a knowing misrepresentation of the truth or concealment of a material fact to induce another to act to his or her detriment. If you lie in order to deprive a person or an organization of their money or property, you are committing fraud. And I will point everyone over to the left hand of this screen. We have what we call a, this is what we refer to as a fraud triangle. And this is in the fraud world, what is commonly referred to as the best representation as to how and why people typically commit fraud. So first you would have to have what we call opportunity. So the opportunity to commit fraud has to be there. And typically someone who does commit fraud is suffering or is under some kind of financial pressure. And then the last section of this fraud triangle is rationalization. And so what this means is that, again, we have the opportunity there. We have an individual or individuals that are facing some kind of financial pressure. And then lastly, the rationalization is where we have these individuals commit the fraud and then somehow in their minds rationalize it by trying to explain a reason as far as why it's okay perhaps or acceptable as to why they're committing fraud. And moving on to the next slide. Next, we have misrepresentation. And misrepresentation is one of the words that we use in our HAF policies and procedures for the program. We also, in the application portal, use what we call apparent misrepresentation as one of the potential denial categories where we are seeing fraud. And misrepresentation is described as an act of deceiving or misrepresenting. Basically, it's a trick, and it always involves a lie, and without this lie, there is no misrepresentation. And some examples that we see, or when we refer to misrepresentation, we're talking about altered documents of any kind, misrepresentation of income, misuse of our attestation form that we use, and then also failing to report all occupants that are living in the home. Next slide. Next, we discuss the culprits. And when we say culprits, this just identifies potentially who some of these individuals that may be committing some of this fraud. And these could be people who are not the homeowners and are using stolen identities to create applications. We also have a different category of what we call culprits, and these could be opportunist homeowners who are trying to get a little bit extra money. And again, this could be in the form of payment of HOA fees, insurance premiums, or again, anything related to assistance that the HAF program is currently offering. And again, the opportunist homeowners are those who are trying to obtain HAF monies to pay costs associated for a residence. And again, it may or may not be their primary residence. And here we're discussing a little bit more in detail what the opportunist homeowner would be. And again, I said earlier that this individual may or may not live in the home for which assistance is being requested. And homeowners who want assistance but would not qualify because they do not reside in that property, or also they would fail to meet the program, another one of the program requirements. And again, as a reminder to everyone, one of the eligibility program requirements, again, is that the individual, in fact, does reside in the property as their primary residence. And then lastly, we just mentioned that the homeowners see an opportunity to have money paid to themselves in creating fictitious bills. And one of the things that we unfortunately may see with this program is that again, this is for homeowners. We did previously at the agency have a program for rent relief. This is not that program. This is a separate program. And so again, just as an FYI for everybody, and something that we should all be aware of as well, is that with these applications that we're seeing with our program, we also have a way to cross-reference and cross-check applications where a tenant may or a landlord may have previously received what we call TRR funds, the Texas Rent Relief Funds. And so again, we're not wanting to duplicate any kind of payment or assistance with those two different programs. Next slide. And next we will discuss red flags. And some of the red flags that all of you should be looking for, or at least aware of, are altered documents, ID addresses that do not match the home address on the application, applicant with an out-of-state ID, applicants whose ID or driver's license appear to be photoshopped or altered in some way. And then lastly, multiple addresses being used. And I will go starting at the top again, just going into a little bit more detail into some of these red flags. When I say altered documents, that would be anything that the applicant has provided to you. If you're an intake center, for example, and are assisting them with completing an application is just one example. And so that could be an ID, like we mentioned earlier, that could be a mortgage statement, that could be a utility bill, and even pay stubs from an employer. And some of the tips that I would say is review those documents and look for things that stand out to you, such as difference in font sizes, font style, color, dates, and misspellings. And again, some of these will be really easy to spot, and some will not be. Some will be more obvious than others. And the next item here is address does not match the home address. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean that there is any type of misrepresentation or fraud. There could absolutely 100% be a reasonable explanation as to why someone's ID does not match with the home address for which they're applying assistance for. Again, I would just say that in those cases, we would definitely be asking questions as far as, well, why is this not matching, or why is this the case? And I would say that myself, for example, as a homeowner, my ID, my Texas driver's license, has my home address on it. My utility bills have my home address on it. And if you search my name and property address on my county tax records, again, has my name and home address on it. So again, just something to be on the lookout when we're having multiple addresses on things like the utility bill has one address, the ID has one address, the pay stub has a different address, or the mortgage statement. So again, just another red flag. The next thing would be an out-of-state ID. Again, this does not mean that this is necessarily an issue where we would have fraud or misrepresentation. But again, this is the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and the reason for HAF in this program is to assist homeowners in Texas. And so we do want to make sure that, again, if there is a reason for that out-of-state ID, that at a minimum, we ask a question about that. And then the next, again, the IDs in the driver's license, some may be easier to tell than others. Those of you at an intake center will probably be dealing with a physical copy rather than a photocopy or a picture, which again, hopefully makes that easier in identifying any potential fraudulent IDs. And next slide. And here is just a really quick example of an altered utility bill that we have unfortunately seen quite a bit. And again, unless you're looking really closely, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the very top of the screenshot where it says account number and statement date, that unless you're looking really closely, you may or may not be able to see that we go from a blue and then a really light blue, and then where the account numbers and statement dates start, you start to see a discoloration where it's completely white there. So again, that's just something that definitely stood out. And then moving on to the amounts. And this was a utility bill that was presented, and you see the amount of $1,775.03. And then you look at the current charges, and again, it just seemed odd that the previous amount due, even if it was for months of previously past due bills, that amount just seems really disproportionate to one another. But again, lastly, I think that what really did it for us here was if you look at what's highlighted in yellow and you look at those years, you can clearly see that that says 2012 and 2013. And I did just want to say that shout out to Mr. Richard Castañon, because we had already denied these cases as misrepresentation. And when I shared this bill with the group, he actually pointed out the 2012 and 2013 part, and we had not seen that yet. But again, some of these will be better than others. Some will be super obvious, and some you'll actually have to spend, maybe another minute or two reviewing these documents. Next slide. Okay, and then the next thing I would say is that, again, we're talking about red flags. We're talking about some examples of things we have seen, but I did also just want to add that most applications will not contain any sort of fraud or misrepresentation. That's actually not the norm. However, anytime you have a program such as the HAF program, in which we're providing assistance to individuals, the potential and opportunity, as we talked about earlier, to commit fraud is there. We also say that do not assume what you see is real. Again, you could see a document appear 100% legitimate, but it could be an altered document, or it could be a fraudulent document. And the next thing we would say that, again, may or may not apply to you, any of you or all of you, would be to evaluate the application for misrepresentation before evaluating for eligibility. Again, I'm not sure that that would be the rule of any of you. We would leave that to the agency to decide. But definitely I would say that please feel free to ask questions. If there are any questions that you may have of the applicant, I would say that any of you should feel safe and able to ask questions that you may need clarification about something. That's perfectly acceptable and okay. And then again, the last thing I would also say is that if you don't see misrepresentation, don't create it. And again, that also I have to tell myself quite often as I'm reviewing some of these cases, because it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole sometimes and spend a lot of time on a case when there's really nothing there. So going back to what I said earlier, that misrepresentation and fraud may not be the norm, that's just kind of tied to, if you don't see it, we're saying don't create it. Next slide. And again, you've seen this this slide before. These are just some important links, and all of you do have access to these links as resources to the HAF program. And we can go on to the next link. I'm sorry, the next slide. And this brings us to our last slide, and probably most important slide. We wanted to make sure that all of you, again, have the information you need in order to report any potential fraud to us. We do have several options for reporting of any potential fraud allegations. And we'll start with the HAF hotline. That number is 1-833-651-3874. Again, this is the same number that is on our website, that is available to applicants and is available to any of you. You would dial 1 or 2 for English or Spanish, and then you would dial 3 for the fraud reporting voicemail. And again, it would be a voicemail that you would leave, and we would ask that you leave as much detail in that voicemail so we're able to follow up on the complaint. The next option would be to report to our email address. We do have an inbox that we monitor and check daily, and this email is halffraudreporting@tdhca.state.tx.us. We have the option for individuals to also send written allegations to our PO box address in Austin. And we also have the option to submit complaints to the state auditor's website on the link below, and then as well to the U.S. Department of Treasury, Office of Inspector General, again in the link below. And that concludes the presentation today. I'm not sure if we've received any questions in the inbox, but we can go ahead and open it up to any questions that we may have received in the inbox, or any questions that any of you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lizette, for your presentation. I'd like to open it up for our attendees. And if you have a question, feel free to use the raise your hand option. And I will call on you. I will unmute you and you can ask your question. I think we have our first question from Ms. Belinda Lacey. Good afternoon, ma'am. Let me unmute you.
Good afternoon. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My question is, so what is the process if we have received documents and we've reviewed them and we believe that there could be some misrepresentation? Do we go ahead and complete the intake in the Yardi system and then alert someone, or should we stop it there and just report it? Because, you know, we could be wrong, but
Sure.
but possibly we want someone to look at it. So I just kind of want to know what the process would be at that point.
This is a great question. I would say absolutely complete the intake process. And if you have a case like you're saying where you may have questions, that's where I would say ask as many questions as you can possibly, and complete the intake process, complete the process, and then you can let us know, hey, this is the case number, because again, at that point, you'll have a case number, which would be extremely easy for us to locate and find. But the more information that you have for us when you submit that complaint, the better. So definitely, again, your job is to assist the applicant, submit the application, be aware of potential misrepresentation and fraud. But again, your job is not to identify it. And as long as you report that to us, and then we will make sure that we follow up with any suspected fraud allegations. And again, just a reminder, you have different options of doing that. You can email to the HAF reporting email address. Again, it's HAF fraud reporting at tdhca.tx.us, or you can call that hotline number or send us a written complaint as well, whatever works best.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have Mr. Gerardo Venegas. Good afternoon, sir.
All right, cool. I just had a quick question. Just wanted to verify to make sure, but all of the disbursements will be made out either to utility companies or the lender, correct? There wouldn't be a situation where we would ever make it out to the person themselves?
Yes, that is correct. The only sort of other scenario here would be where we have
Like an HOA?
a non-traditional servicer, and so again, I think that for us at least, that makes it a little bit tricky, because again, we have to take into consideration that we may have individuals who may, for whatever reason, not qualify for a traditional mortgage, and may have to go the non-traditional servicer side, which could mean really a whole bunch of things. And so again, I should have probably included that as a red flag, but again, it may or may not be a red flag, right? Where we're not always paying to a traditional servicer. We could be dealing with a situation where we have a non-traditional servicer. But
Okay,
yes, you're right. No money.
I'm so sorry. Would that be something like an owner to owner, some sort of like a non-traditional
Yes.
account?
Yes, that would definitely be an example.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Great question. Next we have Mr. Justin Wood. Good afternoon, sir. Okay, we have a question from Mr. Lawson. Good afternoon, sir.
I'm sorry, did y'all hear me? Was I muted?
I believe you were on mute. We didn't not hear a question.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wood.
Good afternoon. Good to see you all again. My question is kind of tied with the last gentleman's question, but from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are just processing these applications for y'all to review and approve. We aren't actually cutting checks off of on this particular grant, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Come back to my question. What if someone is at the house to a family member? You understand
sorry.
something? Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, there is times when a family member can lend them the money to get the house, and they may have the same last name, and they may be related to each other. How do we do that?
Well, in that case, that individual family member would be treated as a non-traditional loan servicer, and they would have to follow the same onboarding procedures as a traditional servicer. So they would have to agree to go through the steps required by the agency to register as a non-traditional loan servicer, go through the onboarding process, go through a training, and so again, they would have to agree and be okay with doing that.
Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Mr. Timmy Sykes. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So I wasn't for sure if I missed the part where the documentation and the intake forms, is that established and created by you all in the information that's provided, or do we document and create the intake forms for the local office?
Let me try to understand what your question is. So are you coming from an intake standpoint, like
Yes, yes. So like if a client came to the office and had to be processed for assistance, and I know that there's the established protocol already, but is there any forms that we have to create, or are you all providing all of those forms for documentation? Is there some type of, with the process that's already in place, is there any other type of documentation that we have to keep locally as a record, with this?
I will just answer really quickly and then hand it over to Flip or Lynette to see if there's any other requirements that are required of the subrecipients. But as far as the application itself, we're hoping that the preferred method would be the online portal. So if you're an intake center, the preference would be that you walk the applicant through submitting their application, including all the required documentation via the portal and uploading those documents via the application portal. Okay. And I believe we do have or will have at some point a paper application, I believe. But again, I don't know that that's our preferred method. So all applications at an intake center should be coming via the online reporting portal. I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to or any kind of other.
Yes. I was referring to that, but also was there any other local documentation that we are required to keep, on these individuals that come through the local office other than what's on the online portal?
I don't believe there is, but again, I will defer to the subrecipient group
Lizette, let me
to answer that.
interject. This is Flip Romero. It's a great question, actually. So as an intake center, you are really kind of the guiding the applicant in terms of filling out the application online. Everything in terms of for applying for this Texas homeowner assistance program is through the portal. The
Okay.
only thing that in terms of assistance, you would be assistant, you know, in helping them in submitting the application online. Any documentation, for example, Ms. Lizette gave the example of the utility bill, any required documents, we would see you all helping the applicant scan those documents and uploading them into the system. But those documents belong to the homeowner. So essentially, you're just kind of helping the homeowner out and filling out the application correctly. And then on our side, we'll make sure to kind of keep those in our records. If that
Okay,
makes
great.
sense.
Yes, sir. That answers my question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We have Miss Savannah Coates. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Kind of piggybacking off of that question, if as an intake center we don't have the ability to allow them to use the computers themselves, can we take that have a paper application that they fill out and we put in the computer for them?
If you haven't, I'm not sure if I understood the question. You're saying if an applicant cannot use your computer?
Yeah, so if we don't have computers that, clients can come and use themselves, it's, our personal work computers, can we have a paper application that they fill out and we upload to the computer for them with all of their documents?
Ideally,
I believe, yeah, I believe that application requires a signature and initials by the applicant, and so unfortunately that would have to be done by the homeowner and the applicant. That would not be something that we would want the intake staff doing, again, just because the homeowner is attesting to this information is correct, accurate, and signature required and initials required prior to submitting that application. And again, Flip, if you want to add anything else, or Lynette.
no. So we do, as part of your contract or your commitment, it is, you are to guide the homeowner in filling out the application with a computer. If there's something, if there's a concern in terms of not enough equipment, we would have to discuss that in terms of seeing how that would work. We do not, and I repeat this, we do have a paper application, but it's meant to be used as a guide and not meant to be used as something that you have the homeowner fill out and then send to us, because it is required that the homeowner fill out the application online. There's no paper application process. There's an online application process, and that is required. So just to be clear, if there's a concern about a homeowner not having a computer to fill out the application, we would need to discuss that as in terms of with your organization and seeing how we can best see how we can support you in the success of helping the homeowner fill out the application electronically.
Okay, and I have a colleague of mine who is asking, can y'all expand on that signature page, what that is exactly?
Sure, it's at the conclusion or at the very end of the application. The applicant, the homeowner, has to submit a signature and initials, and again, stating that the information that you have provided is complete and accurate.
Okay, thank you so much. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberson, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Flip. Great presentation. This is probably one of the most, aside from the payment processing and reporting, of course, one of the most important parts of the presentation, because those of us who participate in the rental funds know that this is definitely an opportunity. It's just, I heard something that was said and I just wanted to kind of repeat it back for clarification. I think I heard someone say we're processing applications and we're not processing anything correct according to this. And I know we just had a uh, long explanation about it, but we're to help the client either in an in-person environment where they fill it out themselves. So they're at our location and they're using our computer to fill it out and we help them scan documents, or in an off-site location, maybe a pop-up or whatever, where they'll actually do the same thing. They'll fill out the information. If they have their documents, then we can help them upload them there. If they don't, then they can bring them back to us at another time and we'll help them. The key is this, and I think this is what may be a question, Flip, is the application by proxy. And so if I'm doing an application by proxy for someone, then I've gone through the application process and we're able to sign off saying that we're doing this for them, for the homeowner, if we're doing it in an application by proxy. And I know that in some of those persistent poverty and those underserved communities we're going to get to, this is going to be something that we'll probably be doing. And the last one is the online application. That's where we're a referral source to say, hey, TxHAF program is this. Did you know about it? No. Let me give you the information for it so that you can do it yourself. Just saying that for clarification, and you can give me some direction if I'm wrong, if I'm off base, or if that gets everyone on the same page.
Hi, Mr. Robertson. This is Richard with the
Hey, Richard.
Subrecipients Activities team. Yes, sir. Generally speaking, when you're helping the applicant directly at the intake center, that could be described as helping them by proxy, because they are in some cases they will be doing the application themselves until they hit a glitch, like assistance with uploading a document, and that's where you come in to help them out, right? In some other cases, you will be literally entering the information for them, right? And when you do that, you're going to come across one of the documents that you're going to have to download. It's called the consent form, and that's the authorization that the applicant has to sign to give you, to basically make you the homeowner representative. And then that form gets downloaded, it gets signed by the homeowner applicant, and then uploaded again. And that's where you are literally, helping them directly at that time. You're also going to be putting down or choosing the organization that is helping that applicant when you get to that point where it asks if they're doing this at an intake center. And if so, then you choose the name of the organization. And so that's how we know who's helping the organization. And that consent form gives you basically the authorization or the proxy, if you will, to do it for them.
Thank you, Richard. I think that answers the question that others may have about that piece of it. I think the other pieces are crystal clear. If they're in person, we know that they're going to do it and we may help them. If they're doing it on site, at a pop-up or something like that, off-site, then same thing, we're helping them out. Or if they're doing it online where they're doing it themselves. I think it's just that application by proxy may have been the one that we need some clarification. So Richard, thanks. I think it was a very clear explanation.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? I'm not sure I'm seeing any in the chat box, but I don't know that I can see any hands either.
There is a question here from Mr. Amir Bafrowi. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. My apologies. It says, in the early days of Texas HAF, February, March 2022, the program held trainings for homeowner representatives. These representatives were allowed to create their own profiles on the HAF website where they could submit applications for multiple homeowners through the rep's profile. This required the homeowner to execute an authorization. Has this process changed or been eliminated?
So that process predates me. I am not familiar with that process. I don't know the answer to that, but we can definitely get back to all of you, unless Flip, you know the answer to that, but I am not familiar with that previous process as it was explained.
Yeah, I will have to follow up with Amir. We'll circle back with the team and answer. I know you posted the question on our Q&A. We'll make sure to have this added to our Q&A worksheet that we're going to post on the website. Great question. Yeah, we all, I believe, started around that same time, but the program has grown and kind of developed into or expanded, excuse me, into different areas. So we'll make sure to circle back on that and have the correct answer for you, Mr. Amir. I think that's for the majority of the questions. Again, we will post all these questions on our Q&A, and will be posted on our TDHCA webpage that's going to be available for you. We already have training 1 and 2 posted on the webpage. We will anticipate having training 3 posted next week online. As well, we do expect an email communication from Mr. Richard Castañon to go ahead and start our Wednesday online forum for you to continue to ask questions and check up on how are you doing in terms of the subrecipient process. So enjoy your weekend. Thank you, Lizette, Ms. Lizette Hinojosa, for joining us and presenting the fraud prevention training. We appreciate you all, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.